everybody. This is Jason Augustus Newcomb, and we are inside the magical circle today with Laura Tempest Zakroff. She is an author of many extremely popular books on various parts of witchcraft. She is also an extremely talented artist and an extremely talented dancer. I'm super excited to talk to her to get sort of a different perspective than some of the people I've been talking to. So Laura, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a great pleasure to get to know you a little bit. I met you at a festival. Oh gosh, it was quite a while ago at this point. And since then I've read a couple of your books and I've quite enjoyed them, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about sort of your inner world and how magic functions in your life. To begin with, I always ask this question, and I know everybody sort of has written about it or talked about it at length, but how did you come to find magic in your life? At what age were you, and how did it come into your world?
I was thinking, like, I need the elevator pitch to get this down to like 1 minute or less. How'd you become a witch? How'd you find magic? I feel like it is something that has always been present in my life. I mean, especially being involved in the arts very young, the play of imagination, to spend a lot of time on my own in the backyard because I was the youngest child, and exploring with nature. I always kind of felt connected to things that didn't seem normal to everybody else. But it wasn't until about my teens that I started to hear that there were other people in the world, and that these concepts weren't just, these weird things in my head. And eventually I found Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler, which was a huge, like, there really are other people. It's not just something like the ye olden times, and that there's a word for this. So it just was sort of a confirmation of where I was already seeing the world, and that other people, it's like, you're not totally crazy. You're uniquely you, but you're still not totally crazy.
Was your sort of artistic life and your magical life always intertwined with one another, or when did those join together?
I think it starts. I feel that the making of marks and symbols is such a highly magical process and practice, to be able to decide that this mark means something else, that there's a symbol, that there's a story to it. That is magic. That is the power of our minds as well. So there was always a sense of storytelling, of myth making happening with the marks, to the point though, like when I had gone to the Rhode Island School of Design, that's where I got my BFA from, I decided to like consciously go, all right, I'm going to create a series of spellcraft pieces instead of a traditional spell that people might think of with a candle, oils, herbs, etc. I'm going to focus on creating an image that is a spell unto itself. And so that was that hyper conscious moment of like, let's do this with the intent, with all of the skills that I've learned, and put it together.
So I noticed in one of your books, I can't remember which one it was, that you did mention that for you, a lot of your magical acts are actually artistic acts, that the process of doing art is your ritual to a certain extent. Is that correct in saying that?
Absolutely. That's where I'm likely to engage in trance. That's where I'm going to be often talking with spirits, deities, etc., is in that art making process. So to me, that is my primary form of magic, I would say. If people are going to like delineate it out to this kind, that kind, etc. Primary one, art. Next one, dance. But you kind of would say sometimes that they are both arts. They're just different manifestations.
I guess the one difference between them, though, is that, first of all, dance usually has an audience, although it doesn't have to. But there's usually at least a gathering of people as a portion of it. And then there are other people engaged in it as well. And to a certain extent, even if you don't do a formal invocation or anything like that, there is a sort of a ritual process. The music begins, you make your first move, so there's a definite sort of beginning, middle, and end to a dance act. Whereas an art act can, I do some art myself, and I mean, an artistic vision can begin long before you sit down at the table to start doing drawings. Like, at what point do you consider the magic to be going? Is it just when you're doing it, or is it the whole process of sort of thinking about it and wandering around and looking at things and finding reference pieces or anything like that? Is that all part of the magic for you?
Yes. And I would argue that even with dance, that it starts with the concept, right? That you have an idea, a picture, very much how, you know, if I get a vision, let's say in that space between waking and dreaming, that you see something that, you know, it's not totally into a dream yet, and you go, that is something I inspired to create, and it sticks with you. You wake up the next day with it until you sit down and gather everything together, to gather the materials, to set up the space, to start drawing it. It's very much like a dance as well, right? That you have to choose the music, that you have to think about the movements and put those together. But so the preparation of it, the exploration, it's a lot of little things. There's no hard, you know, now we create magical art, you know, like to have like I've commanded the things. It's like it's more subtle like that.
There's an organic lead into it. I've got a question about that liminal state where you have visions, and you're a much more talented artist than I am, so I'm sure you might not have this in an as extreme way as I do, but sometimes I'll have quite amazing visions that I would like to represent in art, but then when I sit down and do it, it's still okay. I don't hate it or anything, but I don't feel at all that I've captured what it was that I experienced that I wanted to capture. Does that happen to you a lot, or do you always sort of feel like you get what you wanted out of the experience?
I think every artist, every creator goes through that experience, because you have, you know, that esoteric vision, that amazing of like where you see it in your mind's eye, if you're capable of seeing things in your mind's eye, because I know not everybody can, to like, I want to take this and I want to put it exactly like that. But what's in the mind space and what happens once you pick up pen and paper and pencils and the layers and how things dry, and like it doesn't always turn out exactly that way, and sometimes it can turn out better. Like this first spark of inspiration is about beginning that journey, and then as you develop that idea, as you play with the medium, as you birth it into this world, it's going to change. And I think the challenge is to let go of that perfect or that initial vision and allow it to become what it is, because sometimes that end result is so much more powerful than that initial spark. It's like it's just a little fire, right? It's just a match.
Well, I'm still waiting for that experience, but my visions are almost always better than the art that comes out. I painted that, but I mean that's just, you know, whatever. That's someone else's style that I'm imitating. But so anyway, one of the things I noticed in your book on traditional modern witchcraft, which by the way I want to talk about that concept before I'll get to what I was about to say. This is a very interesting term to me, because I feel like you have encompassed three kind of words that are stimulating to people all in one. Like traditional, that sometimes irks some people, modern irks other people, and witchcraft of course irks, you know, probably a majority of people on the planet other than people who call themselves witches. So you've managed to combine together a lot of stuff that is going to be stimulating to people in different ways. Do you find that people come up to you and like have things to say to you about that, or is it are you just sort of in a world where that doesn't even come up?
I think I ran into it more in the 90s. You know, especially like the traditional witchcraft forums where everybody had a grandmom story, you know, and it was my tradition is more authentic than your tradition. It's older. It's this, it's that. Like it's all this posturing on the internet. People think that that's new now, and they're like, oh, honey, no. The internet forums, right? But it was the best descriptor of respecting and pulling from, you know, being a person who is a result of many different cultures colliding, right? To be able to honor these ancestors and these folkloric practices, but to recognize I don't live in Italy or Latvia or Lithuania or North Africa. I don't live in those places. I currently live in New England, so I need to be modern and practice now.
Let's deconstruct it though, just real quickly, and then I'll get back to the thing that I wanted to talk about. So traditional, what does that mean to you in terms of that, you know, that three-word phrase that you've coined?
So traditional is referring to the patterns that we have found to work, to crafting that pattern, the repeating motif in our practice, and that can come through folklore and myth, and that is brought down that way. It can be simply that, oh, this is how we cast a circle, or this is how we work with a candle or these herbs, because this is what's been done and what's been proven to work up until this point. So tradition is honoring that it's come from somewhere. It doesn't have to be old. because like consider 2020, we have probably crafted new traditions this year that are going to carry out for who knows how long, but it starts somewhere.
Certainly, so I think online presentation of information has certainly taken a big leap forward. So modern, I think you kind of were getting there, that it's just you're existing in the present world. You're not trying to just harken back to some mythical age that is no longer with us. And then witchcraft. What does that mean to you in particular? I mean, because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
It's like you ask 2 witches, you're going to get 6 answers.
Right.
So, to me, to witchery, witchcraft, it's the art and the practice of the liminal, of to be able to connect with the other, and the other is a large realm, right? Is it spirits? Is it deities? Is it the details that other people aren't paying attention to? It's the space in between, and the realm of magic. Like the acknowledgement of magic is all kind of wrapped up into that for me.
So, and is effectiveness a component of that for making change? Because I think that, a lot of artists dip into the liminal in some way or another, but they don't have the intention of doing anything other than having an aesthetic effect. Whereas it seems like there's at least something more than that you're hoping to achieve with your expression.
It reminds me of at an interview a while ago, someone asked, like, well, do you think you're a good witch or a bad witch? I'm like, oh, first of all, like, I'm an effective witch. Good, bad? No, effective. I think I have too much Virgo moon to like just be like, whatever. Like, it has to have a purpose. It has to have an order. There needs to be some sort of structure to this. That if I'm going to invest my time and energy into it, it should accomplish something. Sometimes that accomplishment is just pure aesthetic exploration, but often it's got to do something. It's got to heal. It's got to bless. It's got to banish. It's got to hex something. It's got to have some sort of, it's got to interact with other people too. Like, so when I'm doing things with deities, that somebody else sees a painting and reacts to it on their own level. To me, that's also being effective.
Sure, of course. So, and this sort of dovetails back to the thing that I veered off into this conversation to. You mention gods and spirits in weaving the liminal significantly, but in your book on sigils, I'm sorry, is it practical? What's the name? Sigil witcheries. Okay, you don't seem to mention them an awful lot, and so what is your view on what is happening when you are creating a sigil, and how does it relate to spirits? Because right now in Magick, there's a greater and greater focus upon working with spirits and working with spirits in a relational way, whereas sigils, both from what I understand what you've done, but also sort of the more chaos magic sigils and the kind of sigilization we often see in other parts of the magical community, there seems to be more of just sort of you are launching it into that other space and it's being taken care of, but you don't really need to worry about it. Like, how much does spirits play a part in your world, and how do you view their role in what you're doing?
I try not to like throw the spirits and deities out front for a lot of folks, because especially for new practitioners, they come into this realm and are like so overwhelmed that they're like, oh, I have to pick a deity, I have to do this, I do that, what am I going to anger? It's like you have to first get rid of all your baggage. So like, let's look at the practice first. But from a concept of looking at spirits, I think number one is like, you don't have to believe in deities, God, spirits, anything else. You need to believe in yourself, which is essence of spirit, right? The self-divine, if you want to call it that. Like, if it's not just, you wandering around, it's you connected to something greater, whether that's the universe, whether you see that as a pantheon, the land, whatever that fill in the blank is. And so I feel like when you are drawing something and you're drawing a sigil to achieve something for yourself or for your community, you're not just sending out a petition into the world, you are acknowledging that part of yourself that's deeper connected, and you're saying, okay, here's the message. I am sending this up the line, or I'm connecting these two forces together, that the universe, the other, whatever you want to consider it, you're still part of it, is bringing these things together with your mind, and then you're following through with other actions if necessary. So to me, like, the first number one is that you are a spirit. step one. Everybody else, you can meet them along the way, but as long as you acknowledge that first, you're doing pretty good.
So, but I guess I'm more asking about you than about what a student might be coming in, like from your perspective as a seasoned practitioner, as a seasoned magical artist who's created a lot of sigils, many of which are on you, and you know, many of which are on creations that you've made. Do you see that? Okay, there's two questions in here. Do you see those as being inspired by the spirit world rather than your own mind? Do you see those as being a gift to you? One, and go ahead and answer that first.
Sure. I would say it's primarily me, my consciousness, my mind that is connected to the spirit world. There are things that occasionally come through that feels like it's coming from somebody else. That tends to be more into art than it is sigil. Very rarely do I get you need to do this, you know, that's kind of tapping over there. So does that answer that part?
Yes. So you feel like when you're creating a sigil, it's Laura creating the sigil, not a spirit kind of like sort of guiding you. Because I mean, your process that you mentioned in sigil witchery, the basics of it seem to be that you have a concept, and then you think of some words that relate to that concept, and then you just sort of create a symbol that relates to those words. Am I that's the base super. There's a lot more detail in the book, and if you're interested in it, you should probably check it out rather than just trying from those instructions. But that's kind of the essence of what you're saying. You know, you explore what the concepts are that you're looking to encompass in the symbol, and then you create art related to it. And that process between those two things is sort of a liminal activity as far as I'm concerned, whether you're in a trance state or not. And I'm wondering, like, do you feel like you're logically thinking about it, or just sort of it's coming to you? And is that a spirit act, or is that you're just something that your brain does? There's no wrong answer.
No, I was like thinking, like, I want to say, I often tell the students magic starts with you, right? So I think it really starts with me. It starts with consciously me for the first two steps, particularly, which is one, figure out what your problem is.
Right.
What's your goal? And number two is to brainstorm, which is to consider, how is this going to be solved? What does that look like? And you need to be consciously present, right? It's, I don't liken this to dance, right? Like, you kind of have to know where the dance floor is, what the beat is, what the rhythm is, before you can be like, then I abandon myself to the dance. So those first two steps really require you to be present, thoughtful, considering, you know, looking long-term, you know, past, present, future, all of that. Like, you need to be present. For the design process, which is when you start drawing, that is when I think you start to relax different parts of your brain. You might shut down the left brain entirely. The right brain is going to get more active. And maybe, if, you know, for me personally, I don't always feel like I'm calling in somebody else. It's still me, but I'm allowing that more relaxed right brain to engage, to see the design part of it, and shut down. I don't know if that looks right. Like, shut up, draw.
So that brings us to the more cosmological aspect of this. Is the, well, real quick, aesthetically, do you feel that a design that is more pretty or cool looking, or whatever kind of aesthetic you're personally going for, more effective than one that is just sort of, you know, a person who doesn't feel very good about the way they draw and just sort of create something scrawly and scratchy? Does that have the same effect, or is the artistic aesthetics a part of the magic for you?
I think the difference, actually, what you're getting at is the technique, the level of technique or familiarity with how someone is drawing. I think that for the aesthetic of how beautiful or how pleasing it is to the eye, I think it can be effective whether I am drawing it as an established artist doing this for nearly 4 decades, and somebody who's like, I can't really draw, right? They're still going to have that. And a sigil that is pretty isn't necessarily always effective if you haven't gone through the process and that you haven't drawn it yourself. And I tend to feel like why people respond a lot to what I'm doing in that method is that they find meaning into it. And so you can find meaning. It doesn't mean that circle doesn't have to be perfect. Like, you're like, oh, this is looks more like an egg than a circle. But they're like, but I understand that. And so it has more power than that perfect circle that doesn't make any sense, or the little, scribble through the Punnett square type of approach.
I teach people to connect with their inner visionary space. That's one of the main things that I teach. And I found that very often by the end of a class, people have surprised themselves with how effective they can become at experiencing visions. Do you find that sometimes true when you're teaching that sigil technique, that people are like, I'm not a good artist, I'm not going to do a good job at this, and then by the end they've created something that you're like, I would be proud to call that my sigil? Do you find that comes up a lot?
Yes, I absolutely love that.
It is a fun experience.
And everybody can draw. Like we all were drawing, we all were doing finger paints in kindergarten and making a mess. And then for most people though, at some point in their life, somebody says something nasty to them, like, your bullying looks stupid, you shouldn't draw. And they're like, I'll never draw again. And they never pick up the pencil again. Drawing with a pencil or a pen is practice, right? Like the way you get your signature to look like your signature, it's through repetition over time. And the same thing happens with drawing. It's just like everything else you do, casting a circle, conjuring something, but you have to do it enough times that you get familiar with it and you relax. And I really feel like everybody can do it. And it's not going to look like what I'm doing, which is great. Like, I don't want everybody's sigils to look like my sigils. I want them to look like your sigil and your background and what you're pulling upon. And I love that everybody's surprised. Like I always get, like after every single workshop, there's someone's like, I still didn't believe when you said that I could do this. And then 2 weeks later, like tagged at Instagram, like, look, I did the thing. Like, I know you did the thing. I know you can do this. I believe in you.
So, and this may seem like a silly, left brain question here, but how do you personally view the mechanics of how that process of the solution needed through the creation process to making the sigil, to whatever form in which you launch it, whether that's through a ritual or if it's just through creating art, or you offer a number of different ways that someone might approach it, putting it as a tattoo on your body or putting it on clothing, or various ways of doing it. What is the mechanics in your mind of how that goes from being just a thought put down on paper to it actually being something that becomes manifest in life?
Well, since I believe that magic starts with thought, it's about correlating those thoughts, refining them to fascinate the brain, to visualize them. I like to compare it to writing a computer program. Right? You've decided that you need to make an app for something. This is the problem. It's going to solve this problem. It has to fill in these parameters. Once you've constructed it into those parameters and you've pressed enter, the program has begun. And so your brain acknowledges that when it sees the sigil and it goes, this design is pleasing to me in some way, not be purely aesthetic reasons, but it satisfies, it ticks all the boxes. Your brain goes, all right, let's get working on this. And so you sort of sent that message off into the world. You've hit launch on your block and it has gone off into the world.
So then it would be safe to say that your sort of philosophy of magic is somewhat similar to the sort of new thought, the power of your subconscious mind, that the mind is somehow connected up with the mechanics of the universe. And so if you just put an instruction in it, it's going to deliver that instruction. Is that correct?
There's some correlation in there. It's tapping into the tapestry and the threads to work it. Obviously, I don't feel like just, I'm going to make this sigil and then sit on my ass and not do anything.
Right.
else. So I wouldn't say it's not into the realm of like, you just have to think positively. It's more about, you got to think critically and you need to, engage in that. So the mind starts there. And then for some things, your mind is powerful enough to accomplish that without doing much more. But, say you want to get a new job or you want to buy a house, you need to get a real estate agent. You need to get out there and look. It might not just land in your lap.
Right. So do you see, I'm just asking because there's a bunch of different sort of philosophies of magic that are being bandied about. Do you see a lot of things happening in quick and mysterious ways from that process, or is it more of a slow? Because one of the things that I'm getting told by a number of these sort of more grimoire-oriented magicians these days is that when they were doing the kind of stuff that we're talking about, maybe it would happen, sort of, or a few weeks later, or I'd ask for money and I'd find a $5 bill on the ground. But when you conjure these demons, you get these amazing results within a day or two. And do you find that that the magic is just sort of working in a wishy-washy way, or do you find that you feel that it's working in a very strong way?
Very strong, very constructed way, especially if you have taken the time to really brainstorm and consider the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's no different than like, I would like to get some money. Like, you know, magic follows the path of least resistance. So, and I feel like that is an ancient thing. That is not a new age concept.
Sure.
And so in order to manifest the thing, you have to consider what is it that you're looking for. You have to look at the pros and the cons of that. And I think that if you problem solve, if you start to consider all the possible outlets, then you're able to pull that together versus the, I will get some money, you know, that kind of method. And like, that's very vague. Sure, you'll get some money. And it's the, you know, the universe can be lazy if it wants to be. And so you're like, well, it worked. It just didn't work that great. Like, no, if you're like, hey, universe, this is what I need, let's get on it. Things can happen very fast, very effectively. And, you know, if you have honed your practice over time, then it should be the result that you want rather than $20 in my shoe.
That's not really, that doesn't count. If it's in your shoe, it was already yours.
The cat put it there. Who knows?
But so can your method, this particular sigil method, be adapted to more aggressive things like you know, there are, and I'm not even talking about like full-on black magic, but like sort of like aggressively, you know, punishing someone who needs to be punished because they did something bad. You know, do you feel like this particular style is suited to all forms, or is it more for that more creative and positive kind of direction?
I think it depends on the situation. So example of, say you want a rapist to be caught and brought to justice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so looking at that situation, some people would say that is negative magic because free will and whatever else they want to throw at it. It's like, no, you're trying to stop other people from being harmed. So it's a protection. It is a focus of energy of the law to look at that versus, you know, the kind of petty hacks. I wonder if anybody's coined that one before. The petty hacks. Oh, you know, he looked at my girlfriend in the wrong way, so I'm going to go hex him. Like, so I tend to look at it as more, it's productive magic. So that you're looking for specific results and that you're trying to build things up or stop that there's a directional energy to it. If that makes sense. So
you wouldn't think it would do well with a petty hex then?
You can do it. I
mean, I don't recommend the petty hex, you know, whether it'll work or not. I don't think that's a good use of your time. But
that's it, right? Like no. Perhaps you should work on communication in your relationships. So you
right.
don't work on this shit.
Or just in yourself, feeling good about yourself, so that you don't worry about when people are looking at your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. It's
rule number 3 for me, which is like the don't be an asshole. So for personally, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it. I would rather, you know, fight something like white supremacy.
It's interesting to me because I honestly didn't know any magicians who were using magic for petty purposes as I was sort of growing up in it, and I honestly didn't think it was a very common thing. But I think with the internet, the spread of magic has just bloomed to a degree that, like, I constantly am interacting with people who are like, I'm trying to curse my neighbor to get him to move out of the house because I don't like his music, and I don't know the best way to do it. You know, like that's not my wheelhouse, buddy. You find someone else to jump on that train with you. So when you were working, I know you do some group things and stuff. So there are times when you work in a circle. Are there any circumstances where you set up a more formal temple for yourself in your own private magical work?
What I refer to as getting out the big guns.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, there's times where I'm like, all right, in this moment, you know, it depends on what is the reason why. For a lot of the things I do, I find like just a little bit of focus on it gets the results that I need. But occasionally I'm like, all right, this concerns somebody's health or well-being, or some sort of major, just it feels more major working, right? You just need to bring in a more formal setting to engage the brain, spirits, deities, ancestors, whatever. So I will, in those situations, go through, for me, the whole process of what I consider as constructing a formal circle, a space, a temple, and build it up, do the thing, break it down, even though I have a set ritual room. So it's still going to create the space.
Do you lay out an actual physical circle, or put one out with salt or sand or anything like that ever, or do you do it more?
If I'm going to go full out, for like going back to college now, we're gonna draw. We have, when you have art studios, you can make a giant mess on the floor, and you're like, yes, I'm gonna draw a giant pentacle out of salt and charcoal and whatever the things you do in college. In spaces you don't really have to clean up. Nowadays, I tend to use the elements. Will be with salt, it might be with water, a little bit earth, incense, whatever it is, especially if it's connected to the larger purpose of what I need to connect, engage with. But it's very rarely is it a visible thing that I'm physically drawing out in that way. I might mark it with candles, but enough that I'm not going to set myself on fire.
Always danger if you're wearing a robe and lighting a candle on the floor.
Yes. And cats. We have 4 cats.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
They're not always that smart.
You'd be surprised, right? How often they can put their tails right into things that aren't a good idea. When you're working in a more formal way, are there sort of set ritual formulas that you use? Sort of an opening, or in a way of invoking things, or is it all just spontaneous as you go?
For most of the things I do, I am more, I'd say, spontaneous. It would be spontaneous compared to most other people's approaches. So like when I'm doing the ritual workout, and every single one, we do a little exercise of breath, and then I'm like, okay, air, fire, water, earth, spirit, above, below, there's a very loose connection. What I do for my medium formal circle spaces is a little bit more elongated time of dealing with those. And it might be connected to certain entities or spirits as well. So that I'm thinking, okay, in this area, this direction, this is what I need to bring in. So I'm going to connect, and form a relationship here. And then, there's working within a tradition, much more formal of how things are done, and they're done according to the book, because especially when you have other people, that's also the difference, right? It's like when you're involving other people,
then you got to get more formal, right?
You got to get more formal, because not everybody is going to be like, oh, I can just feel it in the moment. I mean, there are practitioners that I've worked with where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, where we're coming from different traditions, but we know and feel each other in such a way that we don't have to have, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. We can just know and be connected in the moment. But other people, not always so much.
Now, I know you're is he your husband or your boyfriend?
My husband.
Your husband. He's a musician. Does he play music in sort of private things that you're doing that are magical, or is that more when you're doing something in a large setting? Because he's a talented musician, for those people who don't know.
He's very good. He does amazing violin. So we have done small things with just us, and then a lot of the things that we do at pagan or witch occult events, they're kind of taking that and making on a bigger scale to involve other folks, and often collaborating with other musicians and presenters, priests, priestesses, priestesses, bringing that in there. So, but sometimes we're just also very simple. So, to like break out the violin and the pedals and all that, just for like, let's talk to the ancestors. Like, I want to sit down.
So going back to the real simple, that you mentioned that you do just a little bit of breath work, and then you kind of glossed over some other stuff that you do with the other elements. Is it all sort of stuff about connecting the elements in your body with the environment?
Yes. So I look at it as your body contains all the elements. Mm-hmm. You have everything present within yourself. And so when I'm calling in elements, right, to connect with the world around me, it's reaching out to that which exists in the world and recognizing what is present within myself. Like the body is our most amazing magical tool in our possession. And that's actually the book that's coming out soon, Anatomy of a Witch, is all about that. Like this is your amazing tool. Like the other stuff, it's great, it's shiny, things are great, but this primary tool, engaging with that, can make your ritual be, you know, ecstatic in ways that is kind of mind-blowing, but very simple, right? You
Sure.
just disconnect all of that. So it is that to breathe in, right? As you breathe in, that you can engage with your lungs and you feel the air enter your lungs and you go, expand, right? To connect with the air. When you're thinking about fire, and fire perhaps in the belly, or serpent energy and that rising up through your body, kind of feel that visualization, and the water of the blood flowing through your veins, and then bone and skin and hair is all connected to earth. And, you know, so those aspects of the body, but, you know, but also how it moves, like those elements might move, and how they might feel that heaviness of earth, to drop the shoulders, to connect the feet to the ground. So all of these things combine to make an elemental experience.
Yeah, actually, I have some similar ritual work like that I haven't actually used it in a while, but I think I have a recording that contains some similar stuff to that. But then I used to teach a workshop where I'd make people kind of like walk around and become the elements for a while and just really connect with it on a physical bodily sense. That was when I had a girlfriend who was a dancer too, so that was probably why I was more in an embodied phase of my life at that point. So when you are engaging with spirit, either privately or mostly privately, how much does sort of communication with other entities play a part in what you're doing, or visionary spaces? I know that, you know, when you're doing sigils, obviously there's a condensed form of that going on a little bit with just sort of the unconscious, but like how often do you find yourself, you know, talking with ancestors or talking with gods or other beings?
I want to say, can I put this out into percentages? No.
No. I mean, just, you know, like
6 days a week.
On a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis.
I feel like I'm always that person who's talking to inanimate objects all the time. So I feel like this is a daily practice for me. You know, sometimes, yes, I'm talking to myself, but especially when I'm engaging in the art making process, there tends to be working with deities or spirits. And just going about my house or the yard or the neighborhood on a daily basis, I am very much connected to the spirits of place. So checking in with, you know, the oak tree out front, what's happening with the birds in the yard, how's the house feel itself. So that is always a constant check-in to all of these, basically a lot of phone lines. It's a lot of conversation happening, but I'm also a Gemini, so I don't think that's...
You enjoy the communication process with all those different things.
Sometimes you just want to be quiet, but...
So when you're communicating with the spirit of the oak tree or the spirit of the property that you're on, how does it communicate with you?
A good question. So sometimes it is a feeling, a gut intuition sense. And other ways it is very physical things where I notice something's out of place, or I'm just getting a go over here, check this out type of thing where, you know, wouldn't have been something in my normal process of the day, that I'm getting a little bing, a push notification from the universe. That's terrible. So it can be in a few different ways, but I find that paying attention to the physical world around me often leads into metaphysical cues. It's those little tiny details that we were mentioning earlier, right, that you see that other people are overlooking. So, you know, something feels off, or that's out of place, or this has disappeared, or this has reappeared, you know, type of things.
I think a lot of people experience intuitional indicators, but they don't always listen to them. So I look for like the detail. So where in your body do you feel, you know, an indication that this is something that you should be paying attention to? How does it feel? Is it a hot feeling? Is it a cold feeling? You know, just what does it feel like to you?
That's fascinating. I think, how does it feel? For some things, it's a vibration in my ear.
Okay.
That's actually been happening a lot. For other ones, it can be very much a sense of smell, which, you know, the olfactory nerves and all of that is deeply connected to memory. And so, you know, forget what clair that is. I'm like, in clairaudience, clairsentience. Fill in the blank. Somebody out there will spit out in the comments.
Smell? You mean clair? Well, I don't know that there is an official word for it, but
there's definitely one, but like it's not the one we tend to think of the most.
Right.
So sometimes it comes through that. Sometimes it is a little trick in the vision.
It's olfactory is your smell, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say clair olfactory. But
yeah, it's like, but there's a word. I'm gonna look this up.
Okay, so what sorts of smells frequently occur in your environment that are non-physical or non?
So sometimes it's food related. It's a sense of something being dry or wet or damp or slightly say something off, right? That sense of ozone, that's a peculiar one that kicks in. So I think that's one, but the visual thing where you see something out, you know, out of the corner of eye, that space. I think those are the ones I primarily look at. The only when something's really, really wrong, then it's either going to hit at the base of the stomach, which gives you that twinge, or as I've connected with the house spirits here, it is the alarm going off.
Like the fire alarm?
The smoke alarm. Like, it's perfectly fine. There's no reason for it to go off. The batteries are fine. That's the universe is like, I've tried to send you all the messages. Just
we're going with really loud sonic intervention here at this point. It's funny because one of my first magical experiments that I ever did with a small group of people at a youth group, we actually tried to evoke a demon, and the fire alarm went off and the fire people came. So it was very embarrassing for whoever the adult supervisor of the event was, but no, they're just trying to conjure a demon, and there's no problems. So anyway, so when you're sitting in a trance state and you are having a more visual experience or just a feeling experience that you're connecting with another intelligence besides your own, how does that usually manifest for you? Do you have a lot of clear visions that way, or sort of just subtle impressions? How does that sort of manifest in your life?
In the one where it shows up the most is often in that relaxed state right before sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is that, and it tends to be what I consider the download. And sometimes it's a very clear voice, but otherwise it's sort of this intrusion into the mind. Or like, okay, I have to pay attention to this thing, and it is so pressing, and it's not, it's not like your normal anxiety, it's not your normal head monkeys that are like, hey, they're like, no, this thing has to get done, do this thing. I'm like, fuck, I'm trying to sleep here. So there's that sort of text experience. And then for other forms of like deities, when it comes into paintings, like there's the queen bee behind me, that is just a strong vision that I see right there in the mind's eye space. And like, I see it, I feel it, I can sometimes smell it, the sweetness of the honey and the flowers, and it's like, this needs to happen. Very rarely is it like a full-bodied, I think that's what people look for, right? Like, suddenly the goddess is standing right next to you and big thing. It's like, no, it's like I'm very much knowing it's within my own private space rather than exterior of me.
You do use dance a lot as an invocation method as well. How do you sort of how do you allow yourself to slip into that space of allowing divine consciousness to enter while you're dancing and maintain dancing at the same time.
The agreement, right? There's the people talk about contracts. I feel like that's really sort of formal, but the concept of going, if you're going to come into this space, we have agreed that you need to make sure the physical vessel is fine, and that we're going to have a beginning and end to this process, and that tends to happen in before the ritual occurs, or as they're sort of settling into it. But the other thing is, I think, is that having done this for so many years, it's an automatic thing. It's like when you pick up the pencil or the pen, and you start to draw, and then things get kind of quiet around you. It's like, all right, I'm breathing, the music is starting, this is what I got to do. You just click the brain into doing it. It's practice. It's that you've initiated the pattern enough times that your body goes, ah, yes, I need to do this thing now. Let's do it.
Most people who work as performers have at least some kind of stage fright before having to begin. Do you find that that's present even though you're doing a more sacred act, or do you find that the sacredness of it just takes away that feeling?
I don't really have a problem with stage fright. I will have a moment or two of anxiety. Like, doesn't matter. Like, and it's the same feeling, like whether I'm going to give a reading for somebody or I'm about to do a major performance. Is like, how do I know? Is it going to work? It's just, again, decades of things working just fine, but there's still that moment of, but what if it doesn't? You just like, right. Well, you just let it go. And so there's that. And I find, particularly with the bigger things like the Hecate at the Crossroads, the Pan revival, especially some of those really big things that are involving hundreds of people, which seems like fiction this year. Right? Hasn't really happened.
Hundreds of people? Whoever has hundreds of people around?
Hundreds of people at one time in a ritual. Is that I can't plan things out. Like, there is the instructions that have to be given to Nathan and other musicians and any other participants before we get started. And the only thing I can do for my body is breathe and trust that this is going to happen. And it does. So, knock on wood, it's never not happened.
Well, so, I mean, for me, over the years, I've kind of come to the belief, I guess all I can really call it, that the reason that I feel those feelings is because I know that me, Jason Newcomb, is not capable of doing any of that stuff. It's only those sort of ingenious things around me that are capable of doing anything, and I have to put myself in their hands and just assume that it's going to work. And so that feeling of fear that happens just before is like, what if they're not going to come this time? What if that isn't going to come through me this time, and I have to like actually manage this with my own skills, which are zero? That's I think really honestly what I'm feeling is like, I'm a fraud. It's only because I get these things to help me that I get to do anything, like I'm totally dependent upon something outside of my conscious awareness to accomplish nearly anything in my life. So I mean, is that do you feel like that's a common feeling for people who are performers and artists as well?
I think that is. I think it is very common. It was the imposter syndrome, right? Part of that too. And the other thing is, I'm just gonna bring my brain back to it. It's like you're capable, but I think in that moment, like that not good enough, that is not going to happen, that you're not, it just isn't. It's a moment of honesty. It is the animal, the fetch self. It's just like, I don't know if I signed up for this. And I think that is an important element for folks who are effective in their ritual, who are bringing trance, who are doing, who are being ridden, for all of those types of experiences. Like, if you don't have that, then I'm kind of wonder if, like, is it really happening, or you're just like shifting your ego over to, put on a theatrical performance. It's like, it's if you have that initial fear, you're like, I am really handing this over.
Right, I gotta hand it off.
Yeah.
So, in a big ritual performance, at at a festival. I've been to a bunch of them, and sometimes I feel like there's really a lot of genuine, what I would call magical energy going on. And then sometimes there is this sense that it's all just sort of a show and that people are just kind of performing roles. And you feel that in church services too. Like occasionally you'll go to a Catholic mass, you'll be like, this priest really, like, he's into this and this is amazing. And sometimes you're like, that guy is literally just waiting to go have some pie after this. He's like literally just putting as little into this as possible. And so, I mean, I guess it's a common thing. Do you find that that the addition of your music and dance to things is a sort of a cure for that in some ways? Because I feel that way when I see people incorporating a lot of art into the ritual. It suddenly infuses it with more magic for me. Do you find that to be true yourself, or do you?
I think it definitely adds, when you're thinking about ritual that is effective in a group setting, right? The idea that if you're going to involve multiple people, there's so many angles you have to think about. And so the staging of it, the sound of it, the experience, the space, how people are included or not included in what's going on, right, has such a powerful thing. And so many people suck at ritual theater, right? That they're just like, it's all about me doing the thing, conjuring a thing, and
Right.
everybody else watches this for 2 hours, like that. So I think curating, bringing together those elements can be really powerful. But I also have been the things where people have absolutely choreographed a thing to death. Like it had the music, it had the lights, it had all of that, but it just had no ritual essence. There was no esoteric or ecstatic spark or the oomph, right? You're like, that was nice.
It's not ritual theater, it's just theater at that point, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's no deeper connection that's happening there. So yes to including those things, but it's like, I think you still have you have to have that initial idea, right? That's going to be that, or you just have a lump of coal.
Right.
You're just gonna a turd, I'm just gonna throw some stuff on.
Before we wrap things up, first of all, let's take a moment and talk about your upcoming book, Anatomy of a Witch. So when is that going to be coming out?
The official release date is June 2021.
Great. So just a few months. And so are you all done with it? Is it all just with the publisher, or is there still stuff being worked on?
We're in the final edits, which is like the layout stage. Like I've already I get to illustrate my books, which is
it's pretty nice. Yeah,
it's pretty nice. The first book I didn't get to illustrate because it was part of a series, but Weave the Liminal and Sigil Witchery and of course Anatomy. So that all the illustrations and there's sigil work that's in that one is done. The cover has been done, but we're just in those little tiny, like, we'll watch for the typos stage. And then it's out there. So if everything goes well, considering supply chains and such, we might have it as early as late April, early May. So I'm hoping.
Great. So did you find it frustrating having someone else do was that the Cauldron of Witchcraft? Is that what it was?
Yeah, the Witch's Cauldron. Mickey Miller is a fantastic illustrator too. So it's like, giving her my ideas for what I wanted to see and she created it beautifully. So that's like satisfying. It's like when you have somebody who knows what they're doing and is very talented, and you're like, okay, it's good somebody else did this. It fits. It does the thing, and it's how I would have probably done it. Very similar. So that was good. I don't know how other people feel when it's like they just get assigned.
I mean, you obviously are an artist yourself, so probably can express what you want to be created anyway. So, were you surprised by any of the art when it came back? That there were little bits that were like, wow, that was really cool. I would not have thought to do that particular thing.
Yeah. Like, oh God, it's been a few years.
Right.
I think what's neat is actually some of the ideas. Like I think there's a reference to Baba Yaga in there, and that inspired Mickey. So she had actually, can develop this piece of art further? I'm like, yes, go for it. I love that like this cross contamination, this cross pollination of ideas of like, I said this thing and she drew the thing and then she was inspired to do more.
Right.
To me, that's exciting.
So do you think you'll use other artists in other books, or do you think because you like to do art that you're probably going to just do your own from now on? Yeah.
I think it works well for the publisher too.
Sure, yeah, one paycheck, right?
Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be something where I'm trying to pull on different methods. So like say, like visual alchemy, which is the history of art and magic together, where it might be really neat to pull a few different types of artists together and have a collection of them. And that's still different though than like saying, illustrate my book for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the final thing I just want to talk about briefly, I don't know if this is going to be of interest to other people, but I'm curious about it because when I last encountered you, man, you had like a real, an organized approach to doing festivals and doing events. He would do music and have his CDs. You had your beautiful art pieces that you'd like. She has these prints that she creates. I don't know if you have one around here, but where she takes a piece of wood and she takes a print and she has it, just sort of so this is like, and I don't know how well it's going to come through on the camera here, but this is a beautiful painting which she's then painted the wood behind, so that the wood it's a completely unique painting, but she's made it so that it kind of goes with the print, signed by the artist. And so I mean, it's this great thing, and the great thing about them is it's a wonderful thing that you can kind of travel with or something like that, or have in your home. But it's easy for her to pack too, pretty much, because it's like just this, she can pack a bunch of them together. So she had this whole thing, like this really well organized thing. And so what has happened to that whole machine? Are you just doing it all online now? How does it work?
So I set up an actual functioning store. For a while, I had been creating sort of a gallery site using Adobe Muse, which is not supported anymore. It was real pain to like put buttons up and such. And so I'd be like, if you want this art, write to me and let me know what size you're looking for. And then I'd have to make an invoice. And surprise, it doesn't really work well, like, unless people really like, I want this piece of art. And so I finally set up, I use Square for all the festivals. So they actually have a setup where you can do a free Square site. So like, I'm just gonna put up all the art pieces, and also for my wholesale count, since I couldn't like get to the wholesale shows this year either. So putting all that up, putting my books, putting everything in one spot instead of 6 different websites, really effective. And so that's been that's one of those things where 2020 is like, I served you up some crap, but we grew some flowers from it.
No, because you had more time to sit there and do it too, I imagine.
Yeah, it takes time to do the photos and the descriptions and.
What about Nathan's music? Is that in the same site, or does he have his own site that he's also been developing? Or?
We're about to add his CDs to the shop. He's had his own site. So another thing I learned this year is I finally learned WordPress outside of using it for the blog stuff. Like I write on other sites that are WordPress oriented. So I figured out how to build my site. Now I have to go and do all the other websites. So his right now is still on the Adobe Muse format, so I got to get that switched over too. But that'll be a 2021 job.
We've still got a little while to go before I think coronavirus is in the rearview mirror, so you've got time to go.
At least 6 months before any sort of festivals, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of hearing. So, but you think they're going to come back, and you think people are going to come out for them again, and it's just, I mean, like anytime there's like a big hiccup in things, I always kind of wonder, like, I mean, are there ever going to be movie theaters again? Is that ever, or is that just gone? Like, are there ever going to be buffet restaurants again? Because I like a buffet restaurant, as you can probably tell from my, but so so many things have changed, and I just don't know whether they're going to really ever quite get back. Do you think the whole festival scene is going to reemerge and be just as strong as it was before?
I'm hoping it'll be better.
How so?
I think that we had gotten to a point where there's so many festivals and so many events happening. Like everybody was like, we have a thing. We're going to do an event. We're going to do an event on top of somebody else's weekend, kind of stuff. You saw that was really heavily prevalent in dance for the longest time, which is really annoying. And it was showing up in the pagan occult witch community as well, all the magical practitioners that you'd see, you're holding an event at the same time. Or people are like, I'll go to the next one. I can't deal with it. And I think that not having that festival that you took for granted, that some people, maybe a lot of people, might consider more of like, it is worthwhile for me to travel to this event, you know, if I financially can do it, can get the time off to see these people that I only get to see once or twice a year. And so that might change it. I think also the virtual element. So we did the Witches Sabbath gathering last month with this time, and that is an event that is going to be twice a year, and the plan is one will be a physical event and the other one will be strictly a virtual event, and the physical event will still have virtual elements to it so that people who can't travel, you know, who need a scholarship, whatever, can still attend and experience some of those things too. And I want to see more events do that, to hit those things, which takes planning, but like now you have the tech, right? People are figuring out how to broadcast, how to make sure the camera's set up, how do you collect the content and do all of this. So it was like, we've learned how to do it. Let's bring it to the next step to make the events better.